In this presentation, we will discuss capital assets, intangible assets, and infrastructure assets related to colleges and universities. First, capital assets. Under both FASB and GASB standards, the recording of capital assets is much the same. So when we're thinking about capital assets, we're thinking about those types of property, plant, and equipment types of assets, those types of assets that we would typically, in a for-profit type of organization, put on the books as an asset when we purchase them, as opposed to expensing them when we purchase them and then allocate the cost in accordance with the matching or expense recognition principle. Both FASB and GASB record capital assets at historical cost, and both record depreciation. So this, in essence, will be much the same. When we purchase the assets, when we acquire the assets, we're not going to expense them at the point of purchase. We're going to put them on the books as a capital asset, a long-lived type of asset. We'll put it on the books at historical cost, and then typically we will allocate that cost to the proper time period for expense as we incur it. Is going to be the idea of it. In order to do so, we will be using depreciation expense and the accumulated depreciation or some account similar to it as the contra account typically. So that's similar kind of process that we're going to have for both FASB and GASB, as we would be accustomed to, in a sense, for the for-profit, putting the asset on the books as an asset, historical cost, and then using depreciation. FASB and GASB have differences with regards to intangible assets and infrastructure assets, however. So intangible assets, you'll recall intangible assets are going to be those types of assets that don't have any tangible substance but are still going to be assets. So things like copyrights or goodwill or brand names or things like that. Under GASB, which is going to be regulating the governmental entities, you'll recall, so that would be the public type of university, they're going to be reported as classification within the capital assets. So they're going to be classified or reported within the classification of capital assets. For FASB, however, so about the non-governmental entities, the private entities here, it's going to be reported as a separate classification. So the separate classification will generally be located below the capital assets. So really, we're just thinking about the presentation on the financial statements. Either in GASB, it's going to be reported as a classification within the capital assets. For FASB, then, reported as a separate classification, usually below the capital assets. How about the infrastructure assets? So do we have some different type of reporting related to the infrastructure? When we think about the GASB, for the governmental side of things, the public universities, it's going to be reported as a separate classification. So the infrastructure will be reported as the separate classification. When we think about FASB, for the non-governmental entities, the private entities, then it will not be reported as a separate classification.